It's always, I understand that completely. Where men put things is where they're supposed to go, women.
Right on the kitchen counter.
That's not, okay, now it started live. Okay, good. Yeah. Kevin's like nagging me on to get me in trouble even more, you know. It's very funny. Get myself in enough, you know, already. It's funny. The official sign-up sheet for next Sunday morning's breakfast. Hey, if you're really good at making bacon, if you're really good at making something, I don't know. Sausage, there you go. Thinking of other breakfast items, very good. Anything you want. But our goal is to not double. So there we go. That's why we got the list. Because everybody makes breakfast casserole. 16 different breakfast casseroles. So, very funny.
They're easy.
Yes. Are they easy? I don't know. Going through the McDonald's window is easy. That's easy.
Well, honey, I'd rather look up all with you.
Oh my gosh.
I think that's more information.
You just don't know about him.
He's so funny, isn't he? Very funny. Very good. Never a dull moment when Dwight's in the room. That's good. It's very good.
Yes.
Debbie said, amen.
Never. With a G. Between me and Vincent, never.
I'm going to brag on Dwight before we get started.
Why don't we look at this afterwards? After everybody puts something, then we'll figure out what we're missing.
Okay. Maybe that's just for you then. Are you saying that for everybody? Because that doesn't work, because everybody's waiting until the end.
For me?
Okay, just for you. Okay.
For us.
You know, many times I have a very hard time in the coaching and the cheerleading aspect of being a leader in church. I have a hard time with that. You know, for me, if you're here, like, you should have this want to volunteer, you know? And, like, if you don't have it, then, like, fill in the blank right there. You know what I'm saying? But, like, it's very difficult for me sometimes, and I have a hard time with it. But some people you can see are volunteers. You can see their engagement, their interactions. Dorsey, Dorsey's first one here every single Sunday. He's always here at first. Nobody has to tell him to get here, you know. He's just a part. It's part of him, you know. I'm going to go do this last Sunday morning as we're getting ready to start rehearsing, which is 8:25, 8:30. Dwight is out killing bugs in the front of the foyer. He's always doing this. He's finding a way to be helpful all the time. All right, bonus points for Dwight. Yeah, student of the week. That's right. Very good. All right.
I'm good. I've always been good ever since I was a little kid. Squashing bugs.
Oh, that's quite there was a clarification.
The point wasn't squashing bugs. It was volunteering, but that's okay. That's all right. He likes to it was really just the bugs that he was after. You know, it's just here's my opportunity to kill some bugs this morning. Okay, so moving on. We've got 1,000 things. I so wanted to be able to get through this whole section today, but it's just like I got so wordy with the details, and I do feel like there's many things that we're going to learn today. There's some good notes that we'll bring up. So we will be on page 104 in our ESV Scripture Journals. If we're following along in our Bible, we are in chapter 18, verse 12 of St. John, the Gospel according to John. The trials and denials of Jesus. I saw as a name of this one guy's sermon for it, and I really liked that one. The unjust trials and the denials of Jesus. One quick announcement is, let me check my calendar thing. I never use the calendar, so I don't know where it is. If you guys want to mark your calendars, September 24th is now going to be the official day for the Nichols Road cleanup, and man, it needs it. I don't know if you guys saw it this morning. It looks horrible. I don't know if it's like the wet and then draws out the stuff in the ditch, but man, even Tara's like, okay, it looks really bad today. I was like, yes.
I drove down, Deb and I drove down that road. Don't rarely go that way.
Right.
Listen, and the 24th?
24th of September.
Well, the 23rd, we're having one on Cliff Nelson Road at 5:20.
It's a prep. That's it's a warm up right in front of. That's right. Very funny. So we'll have that. It'll be on Saturday morning. It'll be at 8:30. We'll have a small devotion and breakfast beforehand, and then we'll head out. I already spoke about next week is our class breakfast. If anybody, just before we get started, anybody have any time to read the different accounts of the garden scene that we talked about last week? It is such I don't know, it's an excellent Bible study when you look at all four, compare them. We did read through John, we read through Mark a little bit, not really highlighting much of the differences, just they stick out when it's so fresh in your brain. When you just read one, then you read the other back to back. The differences are so, I don't know, they're not major. It just seems major, the things they leave out and the things they leave in. No comments or questions on that? One thing for me when I read Matthew, I'll just say is Matthew uses the line that Jesus says, "For all who take the sword will perish by the sword," which is not used in the other Gospels, but that line in particular is used to show Jesus' defense of capital punishment, which is a pretty unique argument when you address it to Jesus, because he really doesn't address those kind of things. But if you were wondering, if you're looking at Jesus and you're thinking he doesn't have those kind of views, well, he shares the same views as the Father. So just throwing that out there. But Genesis 9:6 says, "Whoever sheds the blood of a man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image." So God ordains capital punishment. Of course, Jesus does. Just throwing that out there. Back into the comparisons, though. Luke, I got to read just a hair of Luke before we get started today, just because there's this part that sticks out to me. I ate lunch this week with Mark Ford, and I made him listen to me as I read it to him, because it's just such a part. How can you leave this part out? Okay, so if you want to follow along, you can. It's in Luke 22. If not, just remember what we talked about last week and how Jesus is in charge. He steps forward and he says, "Ego I me," they fall to the ground. He says, "Tis Zito, who are you looking for?" And again, he says, "I told you, it's me," and he's in charge of the scene. He is, the soldiers are all there. All these details that John brings in, the dark, the light, all that. But here's Luke. He came out and he went, as was his custom, to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed with him. And when he came to the place, he said to them, "Pray that you may not enter temptation." And he withdrew from them a stone's throw, which is a unique distance, and knelt down and prayed, saying, "Father, if you're willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." And there appeared to him an angel from heaven, strengthening him. Man, what a detail to leave out for me. I'm just like, I read that and I'm just like, how can you have any account other that leaves out this angel there? And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling to the ground, only found in Luke. And when he rose from prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleeping for sorrow. And he said to them, "Why are you sleeping? Rise and pray." And we get down to the end, and when those who were with him, and he says, "Judas, would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss?" Again, calling himself the Son of Man, Daniel 12. And when those who were around him saw what would follow, they said, "Lord, shall we strike with the sword?" And one of them struck the servant, not calling out Simon Peter, just saying one of them, struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said, "No more of this." And he touched his ear and healed him. Man, what an awesome detail to leave out. And none of the rest of them speak of the healing, I'll probably say it again later because it's in my notes, but like the fact that Peter's not arrested after this only shows that he'd committed no crime to some degree. What are you going to arrest the guy for? Hey, he cut his ear off, but it's back on there. I don't know. I don't know. All the evidence is gone, but it's just very unique readings. Just trying to highlight a couple things before we get started. I'm already so far behind, but anyway, I feel like today's going to really bring back in the last 7 chapters for us, for me. Maybe even the whole book back to chapter 2. It gives us a different perspective on the atmosphere of Jerusalem that Jesus was confronted with each time he went back, every single time he goes back for the feast. So, with that being said, previously in John, we have discussed, way off the subject, we discussed the process in how we received the text of the New Testament. While this thing's going. And how it got to us, the transmission of how it got to us. Should have had that ready, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, but so how we received the book itself, the Gospel of Jesus Christ according to John. we also call it the story of Jesus as told by a disciple whom Jesus loved. I like that. But the New Testament manuscripts were written in Koine Greek, and they were written on papyrus. And you guys can pass this around. This is an excellent example of papyrus and how they would take it and they would weave it together, tightly woven together, and on that they would write, and through and what they would do is they would take this, and a scribe would come to your copy, maybe at your local synagogue, church, wherever you want to call it, temple, and he would then hand copy this. He would write it on his own parchment, his own paper that is sewn together on the end, not scrolls. We're out of the time of scrolls. Really, Christians themselves, create these, create books the way we see them now. At that time, they would have been called codexes. We've kind of went over all this, but I just kind of wanted to bring it back in a little bit because this week is a good week. But that's called the transmission of the Bible. To transmit it, it's transmitted through these hand copies from the scribes. Our earliest copies of the New Testament. That's this week's topic to some degree. Not topic, it's side topic before we get started. But what we have found so far is found in John 18. It is for years John they thought was written around 100 or 110 AD. That would have been the accepted time of John writing it. Much later, how could he have all this knowledge? How could he know all these things? And then in 1935, they found what they now call P52. Each parchment they find that's of the Bible, they number it, and so P52 is the earliest manuscript that we have. It's dated from 110 to 135 now. Some people believe it's earlier than that, but anyway, it would have at least been a copy of the original. Let's just say. For me, I like to say it's the original. Well, how you gonna know? But anyway, but it is an early piece. It was discovered in Egypt in 1920 and then sold in different auctions. Nobody could decipher it. And in 1935, they figured out that it was a part of John. And on one side, it has John 18:34 through 37. Let's just say, and on the back, it's like 31 through 33, and on the back, it's 37 through 38. And one of the things for me that I love about that is it shows that in the early, second century, you already have a confirmation of the order of the words themselves, the text, right there so early, right after it was written, proving the words have not changed since then. I love that, We'll get to those verses probably next week because it's 9:20. I haven't even got started yet. But the jesting pilot verse, which is 18:36, we'll get to that. We're going to skip P90, but P90 is the second oldest, and it has the same chapter, 18 and 19 in it, a couple pages. I like this. I read this, and I just want to kind of read it. It doesn't have anything to do with the manuscripts. We're way off on another subject now, talking about secularism. One student wrote on the rise of secularism. Secularism is everything not dealing with religion. Secular, everything else. No religion, no God. When we talk about, the term that we use the most in the church is secular music. Oh, you guys listen to secular music, Bon Jovi, look out. But, it's other things outside of God. We're not singing about God. So same thing in business, in your business. This is a secular business. We don't bring God into this. This is, secularism is the idea of living without religion, the influence of religion. The student writes this: every person in every society lives with or by some conception of what human flourishing is, what constitutes a fulfilled life. Does the best life involve our seeking or acknowledging or serving a good which is beyond, in the sense of independent of human flourishing? It's clear that in the Judeo-Christian religious tradition, the answers to this question is affirmative. Loving, worshiping God is the ultimate end. Flourishing is good. Nevertheless, seeking it is not our ultimate goal. But even where we renounce it, we reaffirm it because we follow God's will in being a channel for it to others and ultimately to all. I would like to claim that the coming of modern secularity has been on the rise of society, which for the first time in history a purely self-sufficient humanism came to be a widely available option. I mean by this a humanism accepting no final goals beyond human flourishing, nor any allegiance to anything else beyond this flourishing. Of no previous society was this true. And that is so good for me. We live in this selfish, secular age, more than anybody else. And I'll tell you this, though. They all thought the same thing, you know. They thought this is the end of the world. This is as bad as it gets. But man, the world that we live in now is more selfish than it's ever been. And it's more accessible to live outside of where you see God and religion than it's ever been. That's the time we live in. And John would tell you that that's in stark contrast to what Jesus wants, to the love of Jesus that he's explaining to us right here in these parts. John tells us about his self-giving love, not only thinking of others. In John 10:18, it says, Jesus is talking, he says, "No one takes it from me," talking about his life, "but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This charge that I've received from my Father." And that's exactly what's going on here. Here we are at this point of his glorification. He is on a mission, and I'll stress it again later, but he is in charge right here. All these events are going on around him, and all these people are scheming and plotting and moving different parts, but he is in charge. And that's the way John wants us to understand it. Last week we had the opening scene of this part, and where Jesus is going to lay down his life of his own accord, on his own terms. John shows us that Jesus was in full command of the situation last week. Even in his arrest, Jesus commands those arresting him to take him and to let his followers go free. I love that. That's so good. Jesus gives himself up for the others. Last week we discussed the time and the place that it happened. We had the whole setup of the garden itself and how Jesus was in full command. The light of the world asserts his identity by using the divine name Ego Eimi, and the evildoers stumble and fall. And one thing I like to see there is like that he could have taken advantage of this if that's the way he, you know, they're all on the ground. He could have escaped. He could have continued pressing forward. He could have, you know, he knocked them over with his words, you know. He could have escaped the situation, but he was exactly where he wanted to be, and it was going exactly the way that the Father's plan was laid out. He didn't go to the garden to escape. He's there to carry out the Father's plan. He will lay his life down for the sheep, as he stressed to us many times so far. In 18:8, Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. So if you seek me, let these people go." And then he is fulfilling his own prophecy that he been protecting the 11. When we closed last week, I said I like 12 as a part of the first section there. So I went ahead and read it. We're going to go into it a little bit more, but it's where we start today. It's Jesus was arrested. It is the drama of this last night of his life is just, it's unfolding here today. It begins unfolding. And kind of what we did last week is what I'm going to try to do today. There are many other details that happen. There are other things that are going on through this night that are listed in Matthew and Mark and Luke that we're not really going to go into as much as we could if we were doing a full study of Jesus, you know, or the events of the last night, you know. We're just going to focus on John's account, and we may have some details here and there, but I want to focus on his version of that night, because that's the one we're, you know, that we should be focused on. But and I feel like in this section of 18, man, we talked about in our very first lesson, 52 lessons ago, how reading John is like a Rembrandt. It's like the more you look at it, you know, it's got this dark background, and the more you focus, you see what the light is focused on, the more details you find in it. And man, this week is good. I hope that we appreciate the structure of the layout of chapter 18. It's just done so well. We'll start with an opening prayer, and then we'll get started into it. Dear Lord, we thank you so much for bringing us in here this morning. We ask that you open our minds as we study your word this morning, and allow the Holy Spirit to guide us into all truth. Challenge and change us, and it's in your name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right, so Jesus faces Annas and Caiaphas. That's an excellent name for this. All right, here we go. I'm just going to read the first three verses there. So the band of soldiers and their captain and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. First, they led him to Annas, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was high priest that year. It was Caiaphas who had advised the Jews that it would be expedient that one man should die for the people. Okay. You're thinking, hey, you going to talk about that the rest of the time? Probably. I don't know. We'll see. There's so much going on here. So we find in verse 12 there's this captain. He is this Roman commander, chief, if you want to call him, chief captain, which the word itself means he is in charge of 1,000 men. That's what the Greek word means. We talked about how in verse 3 there the word spira is used, and it's a cohort is what it means, and it also means 1,000 men. Now, if you have trouble putting 1,000 men there, I'm okay with that. Last week we used the fire department example. Dorsey caught the woods on fire outside of his house, and the fire department came and put it out. How many people were there? Was the entire fire department there? We didn't say that, you know. So you want to say there's a handful of them. There's the normal amount that would be sent out to a thing like that. I'm okay with that. If you want to say there's 1,000 people there and Jesus knocks them all down by saying ego I me, I'm okay with that too. Either one of those you want to say, that's fine. No debate. It's probably 1,000 though. But no, I'm just kidding. But whether it's 1,000, 600's accepted, 200's an accepted number, that's a manicle, which is another word that's kind of the same as spira. But anyway, it's up for debate. But what isn't up for debate is that the captain is there. He is listed in verse 12. Also called the tribune, which also means he's in charge of 1,000 men. So he at least has this position, if not 1,000 men with him. Anyway, the temple guards are there. The temple guards are there with the Pharisees. And we know, although they're not listed, we know their doulos are there. They're slaves. We know that because one of them is even named, Malchus. He is called out as being there. He's one of the slaves of the high priest. So there are a lot of people here. No matter how you want to cut it up, we've got a lot of people, and we've got Judas himself, who's also at the scene. For me, if you want to say, in the walking that we're about to start right here from the garden, if you want to say Judas goes on his way at that point, I'm okay with that. If you also want to say once they get him there, the Roman soldiers go on their way, that's fine also. They're not listed again after that. So the group concentrates on another group, or it makes it a smaller group at this point. But to say all those people are in the garden, they're all in the garden. So the band of soldiers and their captain and the officers of the Jews arrested Jesus and bound him. So the order here is different than the way we had it presented in the first place. And the reason why is because most scholars feel like because of the scene of violence with Peter, the soldiers take over. They take command of the situation. Although the violence was put to an end, that's the stress of naming them first. So I kind of like that. That's okay. And like I said earlier, you know, I love the idea that Peter didn't need to be arrested, just because, I mean, what did he do? You know, it's all fixed up. So, but the captain of the army, the officers of the Jews, they arrest Jesus. And verse 12 ends by saying they bound him. And this is so deep for me. I don't know. I did not. There's all kinds of different studies and sermons you can look up on the end of verse 12. It's so good. John MacArthur literally has like 2 sermons that are like 50 minutes long where he talks about this. It's crazy. The guy can talk about 2 words for like 2 sermons, you know. But they visually make him seen as he did something wrong, as he is a criminal, just in his binding. That's as he's carried through town, as he's moved from this point on, he is not just a prisoner, but he's guilty to some degree. It shows his guilt to everyone else. And of course we know that's not his own. But they visually make him a criminal at this point without naming a charge against him. None of the 4 Gospels name any charges against him. They don't cite a warrant that they have for his arrest. They just come and they bind him and he's arrested. Taken as guilty right off the bat. And the thing I don't need to say, but I mean it's obvious, is these mock trials, these are very unjust. They're in the middle of the night. You know, it would have been just as strange in our time. I like to say that. It's just as strange now to hear Dorsey was he was picked up at 1:30 last night, and they had the trial at 2:30. You know, hold on, now that's not the right same thing.
If justice.
Yeah, there you go. That's right. They just, you know, he didn't have a chance. You know, but again, even in saying that, even in these unjust trials, and the way he's handled is unfair, he's still in charge. Those are just details. Don't look at it like Jesus didn't have a chance. He was trying. You know, if he'd have said the right thing here, he could have got out of it. You know, he's not trying to get out of it. In the Old Testament, we're taught about these images of Christ. These images of Christ are called a type of Christ. We've talked about typology a couple times before. And typology, the term typology refers to the study of many pictures in the Old Testament that depict New Testament truths. I love that. That's very good. There are these things that we see in the Old Testament that then most of them Christ reveals to us. One of the first ones, one of the most important types of Christ in the Old Testament is Isaac. We see the sacrifice of Isaac. We're taught that that's a type of Christ, you know. This image of Christ, this foreshadowing of the events, you know. And there in Genesis 22, when they came to the place of which God had told him, Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac, his son, and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Abraham bound him, the sacrifice, to the altar. And from that point on, sacrifices are bound. Even before that, but I mean, listed in the Bible. Psalm 118:27, the Lord is God, and he has made his light to shine upon us. Bind the festal sacrifice with cords up to the horns of the altar. We learn in the Old Testament that all sacrifices are bound. And so here is the Christ, the sacrifice. He's God's lamb. He's being bound. He's being prepared for that final offering of himself. Man, there's just so much going on here in these two words, you know. But so they led him to Annas first, it tells us. In the discussion and in the trials, you have to know that Jesus is in charge. These people are breaking the law. They're bending the law to get the verdict that they want in the middle of the night. But it doesn't matter. This is the Father's plan. This is exactly the way that it was going to happen the whole time. In verse 13, first they led him to Annas, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year. So Matthew tells us that the scribes and the elders had assembled there. So there's this large group there for this first night trial. It is, 50 people. How about that? That's okay. But there's this overwhelming opinion that the Roman soldiers at this point, once they deliver him to Annas, who to some degree is the one who's putting the charges against him. How about that? Since their role's complete, they return to their barracks at the fortress of Antonia. I'm gonna draw my little. Is it already on? It is already on there, right here. Yes, sir. If you guys don't know, this is an official Mark Ford map here. I'm just gonna label it there. So Annas' house is right here, the house of the high priest. And so we start off here in the garden. We come in back through the gate. I'm just going to go ahead and draw on here. I'm probably going to regret this, but we'll just dash it, you know. He comes back in. Here's the Antonia Fortress here. This is where the barracks would have been for the, coming through that gate. I don't know the name of that gate, but this would have been the barracks for the cohort, the military, the Roman soldiers. And then they would have marched Jesus all the way down to speak to Annas. Yeah, we know that the primary person who is bringing these charges against him is Annas. We know that because of where they take him. I already said that. But Annas is the head of one of the most important Jewish families in Jerusalem. In the first century, there's three. His is one of the three. It's the main one. The problem with the role of the high priest in the first century, it's a very complicated job, because they let the Romans, who are in charge of everything, let the Jews have their own way to some degree. You guys want to go out and do your little silly sacrifices. You want to do this. As long as we get money from it, we're fine. You can say you're in charge of this, you can say you're in charge of that, whatever. But at the same time, they pushed against rebellions, they pushed against any kind of a, what's the word? Insurrection. Any type of an insurrection against them. Yeah, that's a funny word. Anyway, okay. That's a 2022 funny word. All right. But any type of a rebellion against them, they pushed against that. And so now my head's off in somewhere else. All right. Back to Annas. So they let him have a high priest. They let him have a man who's in charge of their city. But with Annas, they find out that he becomes too powerful, and they remove him. He's elected he becomes the high priest in 6 A.D., and then in 15 A.D. he's too powerful, and they remove him from office. And they say, we're not going to have this for life anymore. Numbers 35 tells us that when you're elected as a high priest, you are the high priest for the rest of your life. It's for the duration. It's until the death of the high priest who is anointed with the holy oil. Numbers 35:25. It's a job for life. So following Mosaic law, they would have that's your job. But it just holds too much power and too much influence. The Romans see it, and they make that job up for bids. Let's just call it. Well, Annas, he's too smart for that. And so Annas has 5 sons. And of course, when he loses his control, he puts one of his sons in charge. And much like the position of the president, although you're not the president anymore, you're still called the president. You know what I'm saying? So he's still called the high priest, at least in title. But boy, is he still the high priest also, you know? So he's very smart. He's very cunning, I'm going to give him. But he at one point in the first century, all 5 of his sons, his son-in-law, Caiaphas, and his grandson, Joseph, they're all high priests. So for that entire time, his family, him being the patriarch, he's still in charge. I think that's pretty easy to come up with. Everybody still considers him, the real high priest of the community, One thing in Luke 3 lays it out for us a little bit. During the high priesthood of Annas and Caiaphas, the word of God came to John, the son of Zechariah, in the wilderness, and he went out to the region proclaiming the forgiveness of sins. But he even lists out Annas and Caiaphas. They're both there. They're both in charge at this time. But Annas is the power behind Caiaphas. Annas is extremely wealthy. There's no comparison in his wealth in any other Jew in Jerusalem. That's documented in the Antiquities of Josephus, all kinds of different places. All sources name Annas as the Jew of Jerusalem. Why? Pilgrims pay these temple taxes. They take these sacrifices. And where they do this, Josephus calls it the bazaars of Annas. Bazaars, not strange, meaning stores, the shops of Annas. Annas starts this service, which we've already kind of talked about a little bit, but if you're a pilgrim and you're from way out in Rockmart and you're coming to Rome, you are going to bring your sacrifice with you. You're going to carry this goat. You're going to travel with this sheep, this oxen, whatever it is you're bringing with you, this lamb, and it's a spotless sacrifice. So in your travel, something could happen to it. It could break a leg. It could this. It could that. And it would not be acceptable once you get there. So Annas, the genius that he is, comes up with this idea of, I will replace yours, and you can use one of mine that I've got right here for the low price of, twice what yours is worth, So they could just purchase one once they got to the temple. And there's also this other, and I don't even want to act like the guy's not, he's a businessman, businessmen make business moves, He has these inspectors there at the temple. And if his inspectors say that your lamb's not spotless, you can pick up one of these over here for the low price up, and a ridiculously marked up price. This also profits Annas. If you think of the Passover alone, 250,000 animals would have been sacrificed just at the Passover each year. So these pilgrims come, they have to also pay this temple tax. There's a temple tax, I'm from way out and, wherever, and I've got to come all the way here. We don't even use the same money. At this time in the region, there would have been money, well, that's just Jerusalem, but there would have been different money for every area, every region, every province would have had different types of money. but you have to have the temple shekel in order to pay the temple tax. Well, you using your money, I'll tell you the exchange rate is this for you. Sorry, that's not in your favor, but it's in mine, you know. And these exchangers, these money exchangers, are there in the temple that Annas is in charge of, the bazaars of Annas. This unfair rate that he would set by the high priest. The money changers, the animals being sold in the temple. The whole temple operation is called the bazaars of Annas. We're introduced to that in John 2, Jesus' first trip to the Passover in Jerusalem. He goes to the temple, and in the temple he found those who were selling oxen and sheep and pigeons, and the money changers sitting there. We all know the story. We went through it, and this is his first confrontation, if you want to say, with Annas himself. And making a whip of cords, he drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen. He poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned the tables. And he told those that sold the pigeons, "Take these things away. Do not make my father's house a house of trade." This is Annas's business. This is how his family do it.
He stepped on toes.
That's right. That's right. Right there. He is, for me, there's no one who's involved in the money exchanging or the sacrifice swapping that's not a relative of his. They're all his relatives. If not, they're super close in with him, you know. His men, his son-in-laws, they're all the operators of the market in the temple. And they say to Jesus, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I'll raise it up." You know, and they're like, "What?" And they've been after him ever since, the whole time. They've been looking for him. They've tried time and time again. Every single time he comes to Jerusalem, the Jews who are after him, the Jewish officials, this is Annas and his sons. This is that same group the whole time that we've been talking about. They are the Jews from Jerusalem. They're the same ones who are at Bethany at Lazarus' tomb in chapter 11. So the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered the council and said, "What are we to do? For this man performs many signs. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him. And the Romans will come and they'll take away both our place and our nation." Right there in verse 49, it says, but one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all." And then right there in this verse, John reminds us of Caiaphas's prophecy. And he said back in chapter 11, "Nor do you understand that it is better for you that one man should die for the people than the whole nation should perish." And that's their great fear is that they're going to lose this power. They're going to lose this operation. They're going to lose their money. That's what they're fearful of. They're immensely rich, ruthless, ambitious, greedy, and they were frightened to lose their power. And they even say it in the words of John. There's this interesting, before I move on, it's only 9:45. I've got like one verse in. The Talmud has this interesting passage about Annas that I have to read. It gives you this sort of view from the people. It says this: "Woe to the house of Annas! Woe to their serpent's hiss! They are high priests. Their sons are keepers of the treasury. Their son-in-laws are guardians of the temple, and their servants beat the people with staffs, whatever you want to pluralize that." But that's the view of the people in their own Jewish Talmud, you know. So all records show Annas. There's actually this apocryphal book called the Book of Hebrews, the Gospel of Hebrews, and in it calls out Annas, and it talks about his wickedness in the temple. But Caiaphas' part right there in chapter 11 ends with verse 53. "So from that day on, they made plans to put him to death." And that's their plan now. Their plan is not to get on to him or reprimand him or make him start, being in jail. Their plan is to kill him. They were looking for Jesus and saying to one another as they stood in the temple, "What do you think? That he will not come to the feast at all?" Now the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that if anyone knew where he was, he should let them know so that they might arrest him. And that's them. That's the mindset of them from chapter 2 to chapter 11 to now. They've been looking for him. Matthew and Mark both tell us of the other cleansing of the temple. So he's went into the temple twice, did the exact same thing, drove everybody out. This is completely against Annas, and that's why Annas has him here now. That's not important. So this is the arraignment of Jesus before Annas. and setting up the next section, which you're like, are we ever going to get out of that section? But no, when we get to that next section there, we ended verse 11 last week with Peter defending Jesus. You know, Peter told Jesus in the upper room, just hours before this, that he would lay down his life for him. In chapter 13, Peter said to him, Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for you. Jesus answered, will you lay down your life for me? Truly, truly, I say to you, the rooster will not crow till you have denied me 3 times. So we'll read this next section here, which is Peter denies Jesus. This is 15 through 18. Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. Since that disciple was known to the high priest, he entered with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter stood outside at the door. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to the servant girl who kept watch at the door and brought Peter in. The servant girl at the door said to Peter, you also are not one of this man's disciples, are you? He said, I am not. Now the servants and officers had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing and warming themselves. Peter also was with them, standing and warming himself. We're not going to get through this whole part, but I can at least talk about the first couple parts here. What John does right there is he's got us in the garden, and he takes us with Jesus. They go to Annas' house, and then here we are with Peter, and that is the setup. He starts weaving these 2 stories at the same time here, which is just done in such a way. There's no other part of the Bible that's done in the same way, where he's gonna give us Jesus at his trial, and he's gonna give us Peter in his first denial. And then Jesus is going to go in front of another person. He's going to go in front of Caiaphas. And then Peter's going to deny him again. And it's this back and forth. And the way John tells this is it shows Jesus. He's in his glory. He is fulfilling the Father's plan for us, for his disciples. And here's his lead disciple, the best one he has to some degree, Peter, denying him as he's doing these things. It is just, the storytelling here is just unbelievable. To say that Peter is not his most important disciple, anyway. But this section right here is just done so well for me with the 3 trials and the 3 denials, just back and forth and back and forth. You see the scene, and you have a feel of that's how kind of it all happened at the same time. You know, as the night's going on, you have this going and that going, and you're there. But if you're keeping notes, there's actually 6 total trials. Just letting you know, when you use all the different gospels, John doesn't talk about each one of them. But just for your notes, there's 3 religious, and then there's 3 civil. Annas, which is the first one here, the night trial that we talked about in 12 and 13 and 14. And then Caiaphas, and Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin, which is also during the night. And then he's sent to Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin at daybreak. And then he goes to Pilate, who sends him to Herod, and then he's back to Pilate. So there's technically 6. It is a long night, and they're going, and we're gonna talk about the paths. We're gonna talk about the route, I actually thought originally we were going to get to Pilate today, which is crazy. But anyway, a little overstudying there. But anyway, and each place and the things that are happening in those places. But after seizing him, they lead him to Annas first, and this is this preliminary hearing, and it's recorded only by John. I'm gonna skip that. But this part right here, it starts with Simon Peter followed Jesus. All 3 of the other Gospels use the term "at a distance" in there, which is okay. He's not right in there with everybody else, you know, but he's following at a distance. But I like the imagery there that John uses. He was following Jesus. I like the words there. But Peter fled with the other disciples in the garden. But then there are 2 who are following the arresting party at a distance. It says another disciple. And for me, this is the beloved disciple. This is John the Apostle himself. Although modern scholars would they try to put different people in all over the map, you know. They try to say that he didn't even write the book, you know. So of course they're going to try to put other people in here. The many common people who are inserted here are Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus. They're the two, and the reason why they're inserted is because of the relationship with the high priest. For me, they're not in the upper room. They're not part of the 11. They're not in Gethsemane. They're not named anywhere in the story. How do they come in there? You know, just for me. They're just late. They're just out late on Passover evening, and they happen to see this, this group taking Jesus, and they're like, "Peter, hold on, I'm coming too." I don't know. That's a little harder to believe. You know, it would have to be one of the 11 for me. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's even better. Next chapter we go into why it's not Joseph of Arimathea. That's even better. But and Nicodemus, he makes sense. He's definitely in with the priesthood. They all know him. He would be able to get into that inner courtyard. But for me, it's John. He's the beloved disciple. He humbles himself in the story of in the way he tells his story, and he never names himself throughout the whole thing. And for me, as you read through it as a whole, and you get to the end, verse 20-31 there, where he calls himself out a little bit, it's him the whole time, you know. But how is this John, this Galilean fisherman, so connected to get into the high priest's courtyard? Is the good one. So, John's mother is Salome. We see that over and over. I think it's actually listed in all 4 Gospels. Salome, of course, is related to Mary, and Mary is related to Elizabeth. Now, I know you're going to think that's a little bit of a stretch to get, you're playing 6 degrees of whatever it is. But when you get to Elizabeth, Elizabeth's husband is Zechariah. He was the priest, So, are they related? That's okay with me. I'm okay with that. Could he have worked in the local temple or synagogue of his area? Yes. Could he have been in other unlisted ways? Yes. I think that's fine. To say he was more in than Simon Peter, I mean, obviously. But there could be this family connection with John's family, and before he became a disciple of Christ, obviously. A connection that obviously, pays out for him. There's so many different notes here. John's father's fishing business, which we already talked about, was large enough for him to have hired servants working for him in Mark. Also, there's all these things about how the Apostle John used to deliver fish to the high priest's house while he was working for his father. It's recorded in other things, but I'm not going to go into that because I don't have enough time now. But whatever the case may be, for me, John's the only one who fits in there. He would have been the only one that fits. That's funny. What's funny? I don't know. Okay, so I'm not going to get into this next part because it's too long. But we're gonna pick back up there where Peter denies him the first time. Gosh, I didn't get very far, huh? Anybody?
It's okay. We got next time.
Yeah. Anybody have any notes? Any comments, questions, or angry outbursts? A funny thing is, last week there, Tara, the good Tara, she texted me. She's like, "Hey, are you going to do the charcoal fires again? That you did on Wednesday night? I'm like, "Man, I'm not going to get there." And that was last week. I still didn't even get there this week. So anyway, she's like, "It's only like 15 verses in." Anyway, so yeah, we'll just skip all that. We'll continue next week. We're going to work our way through the denials and the trials. If you have enough time in your own time, I think it's through 37. No, it's through 32. Read through 32 in your own time, and even my kingdom is not of this world. Man, that's good. You can finish the whole chapter there. There's so much that happens in this one night, and I do feel like the focus for us should be on John's account, and we'll try to stick on that as we move through.
Good. Two things here, boy. How gut-wrenching is that for Peter to deny him so many times? But especially since he was so defensive.
Let's just say it was 2 hours before.
Yeah,
they try to put hours in there because of how much Jesus talked. Jesus talks from chapter 13 to chapter 17. That prayer is like 25 minutes long. But just that alone. What if it was only an hour or two ago? And he says, I would die for you. Man.
I would say he just cut off the ear of the guy approaching. So now
he's the opposite to some degree.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the other thing you mentioned when you opened up, I know I'll make it quick,
There you go.
about secularism.
Yes.
You know, the history of that to where we are now. I mean, if you see that, it's not going to improve.
It's not going to improve. I agree with that. You
Kind
know,
of like when you raise prices on something, the prices never go back down, they just continue to go back up, so.
that's right.
Same thing, so.
It's only going to get worse. I agree. I will say though, for me, you know, one thing I'll say is 500 years ago, they thought this is the end of the world. I mean, we've got people out here who don't even do this and do that anymore. I mean, kids nowadays, they don't have any common sense. You know, all these things. You know, how are they ever going to be as good as our generation? Exact same things 500 years ago. So, just letting you know, it's always kind of been like that. But it's so more accessible now to live outside of religion than it ever has been.
Love, respect, man.
It's advanced.
All those.
It has.
Accelerated.
Yeah, I agree with that. Even in the last 20 years, let's just say, you know.
Correct.
Oh
boy.
Yeah, it's very different. I don't know.
I had a conversation with somebody this week, and she says, "Oh, I was talking to this lady, and she's a witch," and then went on, and
Yeah,
I'm like,
right. That was just a part of the sentence. Right. Yeah.
I gotta go. You know?
If Scott McCarley were here, he would have just inserted a joke, but I'm not going to. But anyway.
I
Very
just
funny.
did it in my ear.
He did, yeah. She's talking about you. Anyway, okay, that's exactly right. So, but no, it's very. We live in a different world to some degree, you know. No less evil. It's the same evil as it was at the time. You know, when you talk about the beginning of secularism, it really comes from the Greeks and the Hellenization of the world, and that's kind of what they push as they take over these different places. They have, you know, they Hellenize the place, which is, you know, to make it more like them, you know.
Because Annas was killing it.
Yes.
He was killing them.
Yeah, no, he was. Annas is,
Setup.
huh?
Yeah, good setup.
Annas has this businessman mindset for me, and he's not thinking of God. And when in Matthew, when Jesus calls out and he says, you vipers, you know, you all these things, he's talking to Annas and Caiaphas right there. That's who he's talking to. He sees what they've done to the Jewish religion and the law, and they've added all these extra things, and they're not focused on anything other than these small details, which you're not even you know, following God, you know. Like the whole thing's just messed up, and you can see in Jesus' words, and as he preaches and he goes around, that's what he's focused on, you know, is trying to correct this perverted religion that they have going on in Judaism in the first century. Sad for me. But any other comments? Anybody got any angry outbursts? We'll take those.